Hello there. This lesson will just take you through some basic ideas of how you can set up your own light show. So what we've learned over the past few weeks is how Arduino can control the lights. And so, we've set up this electrical circuit. So you learned a little bit of electronics there. And then we sort of went into our big two ideas here that we've got a setup function and then a loop function. And so the setup we learned is that's where we can set the pin mode and do it as output. And one thing we saw at the beginning is we did this, this is from say 5 to 13 here. We had, whatever that is, 9 separate statements saying pin mode 13, pin mode 12, pin mode 11, and so on, setting those all to output. Well, we learned as well that this for loop, and even though it looks a little complex, once you sort of understand what it's doing, it can make your code really, really efficient. And so the idea here is we start this value at I to be 13, and this is going to run through the loop as long as I is greater than 5 or equal to 5. And every time it gets through the loop, it takes 1 off of I. So the first one through, I is 13. So is 13 greater than equal to 5? Yes, 13 is bigger than 5, so therefore it runs through. Where you have the I here, it's going to replace it with 13. So it turns 13 on. Then 13 becomes 12. 12 is greater than 5, so it turns 12 on because I is now 12. And so on and so on and so on until it got down to 5. Is 5 greater than equal to 5? Yes, so it turns, I is going to be 5, so 5 is turned on, and then it drops down to 4. Okay, now is 4 greater than or equal to 5? No. So that's why it doesn't run this code, and it drops out of this loop, and in fact drops out of the setup function. The setup function will no longer be run until you sort of restart or start your simulation. Now in the loop, and this gets a little bit confusing. I wish they used a different name than loop here, like say update or something like that. The loop is the main function of the program, of Arduino, and everything has to sort of come from and start from the loop function. And so I put these little lines here just to comment things out. I'll just remove them for the moment. The idea here is that we can call or use functions that we've defined down here. And so if you recall from maybe I think the second week that we did this, we created Night Rider, and then we had all these lines of code inside the loop. Well, that worked, but the trouble is that it was pretty messy, okay? And so you had like 80 lines of code sitting inside the loop function, and if there was a problem or you wanted to add more, it just became more and more complex. So what was nice about programming with functions is that we could create our own little function. And so that's what we did right here. Night Rider, right, is our function that has a loop going one way, and we turn the lights on and off sequentially. And then we had it going the other way, turning them on and off sequentially again. And so that's what the same idea with the loop. So whenever I talk about for loops, I'm talking about this kind of statement here, where we can run through a certain number. Now we put this int here as a argument, this wait as an argument, so that we could easily control how fast or how slow our Night Rider ran. And so when we wanted to use it, we just called Night Rider, making sure the spelling was the same. And because we put a value in here, we had to put a value in here. So if 200 would be a fast one and so on. Okay, 1,000 would be a slower one. Okay, you can create a bunch of functions. So I created a one-way right. So all the lights turned on sequentially towards the right, okay, from 13 to 5 on my board, that's to the right. And then I created one that was one-way left, sequentially left to right, okay, going from 5 to 13. So same function as the Night Rider, just sort of breaking it down into 2 separate functions. Then I asked you to create the all on and all off functions. Now, one thing that got a few students here was that even though this is in a loop, if there's no delay here, it goes so quickly, you can't differentiate between turning them all off, all on instantaneously and turning them all on in the loop. In fact, if you had written out digital write 5 high, digital write 6 high, and so on, like if you just wrote out all those statements, it still does it sequentially. It does it one after the other. The key thing with this is that we put the delay outside the for loop, and therefore it would turn them all on, and then you could get it to stay on for a certain period of time. In fact, they would always stay on unless instructed to turn off, and that's why we sort of created this companion one, all off. Same idea, but just setting them all to low, okay? And so if I come back up here, sorry, jumping around again, but then we could call it all on and all off, and then the night writer, okay? And then now I'm going to show you my inside out here in a second. So if I ran this, right, we saw them turning all on for a second, all off for a second, then a night writer running at 200 speed. Now that was interesting. My night writer jumped back. How did that happen? Oh, I think, what it was that I made the mistake here that caused the problem last week. So I have to fix that problem. Yes. So while I is greater than or equal to 5, well, I starts at 6, I is greater than or equal to 12. I would never be then. So let me fix that. So that was last week's issue right there. So I'll start that simulation again. So all on for a second, all off for a second, night writer, and it's going back now. Perfect. Now this is my inside out, okay? So you just saw that there, and let me just repeat this over and over again. So I'm going to go into my loop. The 2 forward slashes like that are commenting it out, so this code won't run. So I'm going to do inside out. Now it says hard, and I'll explain the difference there in a second. So that's the inside out, turns it off, inside out, turns it off. So there's a little bit of a delay. So really what I'm doing here is turning lights on at the same time, but moving out. Okay, I could do an outside in if I wanted. That might be an option for you. Now, why I've got inside out hard and inside out easy. Let's go down and look at the functions here. Inside out easy. Now, why I called it easy was because it doesn't involve a loop, okay? And when you start to create your own light patterns, I don't mind. You can do it this way. This is perfectly acceptable, okay? It's just not as efficient. So what did I do? Well, I figured out the middle one, digital, so that was 9, and I set that to high. I put the delay in there, just like we did with the night writer, so that it would wait a certain amount of time. Then what I needed to do was the next thing, because I started in the center, I want to turn that one off, but turn the other 2 on either side. So in that case, 8 and 10, turn them on sequentially, at the same time. So I turned 9 off, and then I turned 8 and 10 on, delay, so that we can see it. Then basically it just follows that pattern. So 8 and 10, which I had turned on, now need to turn off. And the 2 sort of on the outside of that, which would be 7 going the other way and 11 going the other way, are turned on. 7 and 11 get turned off, 6 and 12 turned on, 6 and 12 turned off, 5 and 13, the 2 extremes, are turned on. Now I didn't turn them all off. I could, but what I did there just to make sure that they all turned off is as I jump up again here, I used this all off function. In fact, as I go down here, I could have put the all off function right in here as well, if I wanted to. Either way, it's not a big deal. So that's why I called it easy. There's more lines of code, but it's a bit more intuitive to do. And as you create your own patterns, so if you wanted to do the outside in, right, you could do it this way. Perfectly fine, okay? Now, Mr. Fleming, being the complicated guy he is, he decided to do it the harder way with a loop. So notice again, I've sort of reduced whatever this number of lines of code, okay? And there wasn't a huge number here, so the reduction wasn't as great as before. But, I've gone from maybe, 20 lines of code down to about, 6 lines of code here. So what did I do? Well, there's a relationship between the pin and the number, right? So as one was going up, the other was going down, right? So 6 and 12, and the next one was 5 and 13. So what I did was I set I not to a pin number, but just sort of to a counter, and I set that to 0. And basically, we could go through this 5 times. So that's why I did it up to 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 times. And so the first one, now it doesn't really matter because they're all off. So what I did was I started with 9. I turned someone off, okay? In fact, I turned off. So I would have been 0. So 9 minus 0 plus 1. Okay, so it turned off 10, but 10 was already off. It doesn't matter. And then this one would have turned off 8, right? But they're all off to start with, so it didn't really matter. Here, it was 9 minus 0. Well, 9. So I turned 9 on, and I turned 9 on. It doesn't really matter that I'm giving 2 signals to turn it on. It's still on. It's like turning the light switch, trying to turn it on again. It's still going to be on. And then put the delay there. So what I did next was I became 1, okay? And then so as I, that's still less than 4, so that's fine. So what happened here is, notice what happens. 9 minus 1 plus 1. Well, that's 0. So 9 minus 0 is 9. So it turned off 9. Same thing here. This time it's plus 1 minus 1. Same idea. But this is interesting. Now to turn it on, 9 minus 1 is 8. So really it turned on 8, and then it turned on 10. So 8 and 10 came on. Went up, now I becomes 2. So it gets a little bit trickier here, but it's just adding and subtracting. So 9 minus 2 is 7 plus 1. I turned off 8. Okay, 9 plus 2 minus 1. 11 minus 1, 10, right? So I turned off 10. And this time, 9 minus 2 is 7, and 9 plus 2 is 11. So I turn on 11. Okay, so this is just a little bit more of a complex way of doing the same thing. Now, what is your job here? What do you have to do? Well, what I want you to do is make the light show, okay? So like last week, I showed you a couple of videos. I mean, obviously one was doing your, whatchamacallit, your house. You're not going to do that. But the other one was a regular sort of LED light show here. And so if you pop up to, sorry, moving around, up here to your loop, what I'm expecting is that you're going to have different functions. You're going to call different functions, okay? And you're going to make your light show. Now, what do you need to do? So obviously you can use the ones that I've got already. So the all on, all off, the inside out hard, inside out easy. What else? There is the one way right, one way left. All those functions are going to be available to you. In fact, I will give you this code, okay? So you can use this code if you don't already have the code. Now, if you want to be, and this is going to be written down in the assignment as well, you need to create at least 2 new functions, okay, that aren't Knight Rider, that aren't inside out. I mean, it could be outside in. It could be alternating lights. It could be flashing them all on and off. There's a lot of variety there, okay? And if you want an A, you have to have created at least 4 original functions, okay? Just like I talked about before, those ones, I mean, there's a myriad of different ones. You could get 2 to turn on at a time, right? And it works its way, 13 and 12 turn on, and then 11 and 10 turn on. There's so many things. There's what I call the rev counter, where it sort of gets, they all turn on, and then they all sort of turn off. So they're all on at a certain time, and then as they go back, they turn off. So there's so many different things you can do. In fact, just giving you 2 or 4 as options there, I encourage you to try more if you'd like. And so, you need to create those functions. So like I said, for the B, 2 new functions, whatever you want to call it, you have to create your own function there. And then make sure you call it in your light show. So when I watch your light show here, I should see some of my functions, and then I should see some of your functions, and make sure it's kind of interesting. I know it's not nearly as good as if we did it IRL in real life, but it's what we can do here. And then for the A, right, making sure that you've got at least 4 of your own functions, that they're called inside the main loop, And again, it looks kind of decent there. Okay, so yeah, try to do that. I'm going to give you a little bit of extra time to get that. And like I said, I also give you this code here so that if you need to use it, feel free to borrow from it. Okay, so this is really an application of what you've learned, and I hope to see some neat light shows there. Good luck.